Right.
Yeah, that's funny though.
Okay everyone, today I'm going to be showing you real-life quantum tunneling, and I'll also be explaining how you can do it for yourself at home. So first let me explain what quantum tunneling even means. So before quantum mechanics came around, all we had was classical physics. And classical physics goes something like this. If you know at time 1 the position and velocity of this ball, then you can easily predict at time 2 the position and velocity of that ball. So it's easy to predict if you have a ball flying through the air where it's going to be later. And it turns out that classical mechanics works really well for large objects. But when you get things that are really small, it turns out that they don't work so well. Let's say, for example, this were now the size of an electron. If that were the case, we can no longer predict at some future time where exactly the ball is going to be. But we have to give some probability curve of where it's most likely to be when we measure it. And as a result of this, some weird things can happen, and one of them is called quantum tunneling. Now, quantum tunneling goes like this. Let's say, for example, that there's some barrier that causes a particle to be reflected like this. Now, in classical mechanics, no matter what happens, this ball's not going to end up on the other side of this barrier. The only way it could do that is if it went around it or it broke through it. But if you say that the particle is going to move in a straight line and it's not going to break through it, it means that in classical mechanics, classical physics, there's no way it can get through it. But what's weird is if you shrink everything down to a smaller scale, that's not the case. So for example, let's again say this is now the size of an electron. Well, even on the quantum scale, if something's pretty thick, you're going to get a pretty close to zero probability that you're ever going to measure the electron on the other side of this barrier. But what happens is, if that barrier becomes very thin, there becomes a non-zero probability that you'll find the electron on the other side of the barrier without ever having broken the barrier. So what that means is, on a quantum scale, sometimes electrons can just go through stuff. And quantum tunneling is interesting because no matter how impenetrable your barrier is, it doesn't matter because there's always some non-zero probability that a particle is going to end up on the other side of it when you measure it, as long as this barrier is thin enough. So the particles that we're going to be using for our experiment are photons. And the impenetrable barrier that we're going to be using is a reflective surface. Now, instead of using a mirror for our reflective surface, I'm going to... And quantum tunneling is interesting because no matter how impenetrable your barrier is, it doesn't matter because there's always some non-zero probability. And quantum tunneling is interesting because no matter how impenetrable your barrier is, it doesn't matter because there's always some non-zero probability that a particle is going to end up on the other side of it when you measure it, as long as this barrier is thin enough. So the particles that we're going to be using for our experiment are photons. And the impenetrable barrier that we're going to
Welcome to Hollywood. Prepare your defenses. Select your hero.
We're all soldiers now.
You feel that? I am ready to roll. I am loving this.
Group up.
Attackers incoming in 30 seconds.
Much obliged.
Привет.
Group up with me.
Join me. Thank you.
Got it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Attackers incoming.
Form up.
Defend objective A.
Schutzengel ist da.
Someone had to do it. Come here and get stabilized. Powered up. I'm a man on a mission. Stay out of my way.
Your support has arrived.
Got it. Team, heal up here. Group up.
Battery is ready. Helden sterben nicht.
I've got you in my sights. I love the smell of pulsation in the morning.
Heroes never die. Damage boost engaged.
Tactical necessity.
My ultimate is ready.
Hello. I'm taking care of you.
Acknowledge. My ultimate is charged. Everyone heal up.
Double kill.
Healing stream engaged.
Hello. You okay?
Let's group up here. Damn!
No! Anyone but the Mercy.
This old dog's learned a few tricks.
will. Affirmative.
I'm a man on a mission. Stay out of my way. Acknowledge.
60 seconds remaining.
Let's group up here. My ultimate is charging.
Group up with me.
Hey there. Powered up. All up here. Understood.
Damage affirmative. Dein Schutzengel
30
ist da.
seconds remaining.
Enemies re-engaging. My ultimate is charged. I need healing. Sniper, alright. Easy. tactical necessity.
10 seconds remaining.
Heroes never die.
For the Crusaders!
Round 1 complete. Prepare to attack. Select your hero.
Man, you got a laser. You're retarded.
I feel a lot better when you watch my back.
We all need someone who can trust us.
Attack commences in 30 seconds.
Get your ass against the wall. Go against the wall. Get against the wall. You're under arrest, boy. Go. Go.
Miss Monken. Reinhardt, I must say you're looking quite well. This life must agree with you.
And you are looking as lovely as ever.
Got it.
Everyone.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Attack commencing. Capture objective A.
Привет! Sniper, be ready!
The war goes on.